Welcome to another video from explainingcomputers.com. This time we're going to look at Rocky Linux. This is an important distro, as whilst it's free and open source as most distros are, it's also binary compatible with Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which is a paid product. Due to its Red Hat compatibility, Rocky Linux is one of only a few distros officially supported by some Linux applications, such as, for example, DaVinci Resolve and various other visual effects packages. And indeed, DaVinci Resolve only officially supports Rocky Linux. And for that reason, I've been thinking of checking it out for some time, so let's go and take a closer look. Right, here we are on the Rocky Linux website, and I love how it describes itself as being 100% bug-for-bug compatible with Red Hat Enterprise Linux, or in other words, binary compatible. Binary compatibility means that program code compiled into an executable binary file that runs on one Linux distro will run flawlessly on another. So here, programs compiled for Red Hat Enterprise Linux will run flawlessly in Rocky Linux. Related to this, the reason that some applications only officially support some Linux distros is because their publishers know that not all distros are binary compatible. So, rather than offering versions compiled for different distros, they offer a version for one or a few officially supported distros on which they know their files will work. This is the case with the DaVinci Resolve video editor, which for many years only supported a distro called CentOS. This was also derived from Red Hat Enterprise Linux, but has now been discontinued. When it was reported that CentOS was ending, its original founder announced that he'd create a new distro with the same goals. Subsequently, in June 2021, Rocky Linux 8.4, the first stable version, was released. And in turn, DaVinci Resolve adopted Rocky Linux as its only officially supported distro. More broadly, others in the video community began a migration from CentOS to Rocky Linux. Reflecting this, in September 2024, the VFX Reference Platform published this report on the state of play of Linux in visual effects and animation. This includes this very interesting chart which reveals how, in September 2024, Rocky Linux versions 8 and 9 together accounted for about 45% of Linux workstation installations. Admittedly, about 33% were still running CentOS. But, as this pie chart shows, planned new deployments are dominated by Rocky Linux. And this is why, in this video, I'm going to focus on getting Rocky Linux installed with the latest version of DaVinci Resolve. So, let's go back to the home page and click on Download down here, where we find lots of images are available, and we're going to start with a workstation image for version 9.4 with its default GNOME desktop. And as you can see, I downloaded this earlier, I don't need to download it again, and indeed we're all set up to use Balena Etcher to write the ISO to a USB drive. So let's start the process, and as it runs I need to note two things. Firstly, we're working on my test rig, which is an i5-10400 with 16GB of RAM and the 2GB GT1030. This is a relatively low specification, but as I've shown in other videos, it can run DaVinci Resolve perfectly well in both Windows and Ubuntu. Critically, it also has an NVIDIA graphics card, which is what's generally recommended for running DaVinci Resolve and other visual effects applications. Now, I do know that some people have success with AMD GPUs, but here the focus will be entirely on a system with NVIDIA graphics. Secondly, it's important to note that getting Rocky Linux working with NVIDIA graphics is not straightforward. A few videos ago, I noted how it's perfectly possible to install, configure and use a mainstream end-user Linux distro like Mint, Zorin or Ubuntu without using the terminal. But Rocky Linux is not this kind of end-user focused distro. and so in this video we will be using the terminal. Right, here we are booting from our Rocky Linux USB drive, where, as we can see, it gives us two options to either start Rocky Linux or to start with a media test. So let's be virtuous and include the media test. And it's worth letting you know that I've got secure boot turned off, because we're going to have enough problems getting Rocky Linux set up and configured with all our NVIDIA graphics drivers and stuff. We won't give ourselves the extra problem of doing it with secure boot. Anyway, let's now speed on through till we get to something exciting. And this certainly looks exciting. So let's click to install the hard drive. And I think we have to click it again for some reason, so that'll make it work. And here we are in the Rocky Linux 9.4 installer, where it's automatically picked up my language. That's rather clever, so we'll just continue. And on this screen, what we need to do is to clear everything with a warning icon. So let's first of all click on Installation Destination, where we'll select this SSD I've got connected to my test rig. That'll be fine, and we can click on Done like that. And I'm also going to set a root password. There we are, and we'll Done again. And because I clicked on root password first, user creation has now had its tick removed, but we are going to create a user. There we go, and we're now ready to click on Begin Installation. And by the wizardry of computing, Rocky Linux has now been installed. So we'll click on Finish Installation. And I imagine we now have to reboot. So we will now reboot. And here we are. So let's now log in. And oh look, we're welcome to Rocky Linux. And I'm not going to take the tour. I'll click on No Thanks. And what we have here is Rocky Linux as we selected earlier with its default GNOME desktop. And the first thing I'm going to do therefore is to go into Settings down here and to go down to Accessibility and give us some slightly larger text and a larger cursor size so we can see things more clearly in this video. And if we click up here, we can look at activities, and let's just see what's pre-installed. And there's not a lot, but what we do have is very useful. We have LibreOffice, we have got the Firefox web browser, videos, calculator, etc., some basic utilities. So everything we need to get on with work in Linux is pre-installed. And as this is a vanilla version of GNOME, we don't have things like, for example, minimize and maximize buttons on our windows. So what I'm going to do is just to go back to Activities and go to Software and Browse Software. And then we'll do a search here for GNOME tweaks like that and pick that one up like that and install. And there we are. That was nice and fast. And we can click on that. Don't care, because the thing I care about mostly is window title bars. We must have maximize and minimize buttons on our title bars, because without them I would go insane. But we've got them now. That is great. We have installed Rocky Linux. Now, whilst Rocky Linux is installed, and I've also selected another wallpaper, we've yet to add the required drivers for our NVIDIA graphics card, including the installation of CUDA and other necessary configuration to allow us to run DaVinci Resolve and similar applications. And unfortunately, unlike in Linux distros such as Ubuntu, Linux Mint or Zorin OS, there are no graphical tools, let alone install menu options to help us with this process. Over the past few days, I've therefore been doing a lot of experimenting as well as a great deal of reading around, and so far I've not come up with a remotely straightforward method for sorting all this out in a clean install of Rocky Linux. Clearly, this matter causes a great deal of frustration online, and so here I've decided to demonstrate a pragmatic method for getting a Rocky Linux video editing system up and running. And this will not involve doing anything else in this install of Rocky Linux. Earlier, back in Windows, I went to the Blackmagic design website and clicked to download the free version of DaVinci Resolve 19 for Linux. And having provided the usual details, I downloaded a zip file that contained both an installation file as well as very helpful PDF instructions. These include a link to download an ISO file from Blackmagic Design, which contains Rocky Linux all pre-configured with NVIDIA drivers, CUDA and other settings that work with DaVinci Resolve. And as you would, I'm sure, guess, I've downloaded that ISO file. I've got it over here. You can see it's considerably bigger than the one we obtained earlier, and so what we're going to do is to reinstall Rocky Linux using this ISO file. However, it's important to note that the Blackmagic Design ISO file is still, at the time of making this video in late 2024, for Rocky Linux 8.6. And sadly, as we can see if we look at the version guide online, here we are, it went end of life in November 2022. However, Rocky Linux 8.10 is still supported until the 31st of May 2029. So what we're going to do is to install 8.6 from the Blackmagic Design pre-configured ISO and then update it to 8.10. And sadly, this will break some of the required NVIDIA Setup, which we'll have to fix. But in my estimation, this provides the quickest method to get a working system. So let's start things off by bringing up Balena Etcher so we can write the Blackmagic Design ISO file to a USB drive. Right, here we are booting up from the Blackmagic Design Rocky Linux ISO file, and as we can see we have the option either for automatic configuration or manual configuration, and here I think we'll go for automatic configuration. And here we are delivered straight into the installer where I'll select English United Kingdom and continue. And as previously, we need to clear the warnings, which are time and date, user creation, and I'll set a root password. And there we are, everything is ready to begin installation, although I must give you a very important warning, which is using this automatic install process, all connected drives will be formatted as system storage. So do make sure you only have drives connected you want to use for this purpose. Anyway, with that warning given, we'll click on Begin Installation, and as usual, speed on through. And there we are, installation is complete, and we can reboot the system. And here we are coming up again, and if we just drop out of fast forward, it's worth noting here that clearly we're not currently in a resolution of 1920 by 1080, it is much lower. The graphics drivers here clearly need to be sorted out. But now we've arrived at the login screen, things look much better, so let's log in. Here we go, and there we are, running Rocky Linux with a Blackmagic Design desktop wallpaper. And with reference to what we just saw, the first thing I'm going to do is to reboot. So let's just do that and restart again. And this time we went straight through without that strange section at a different resolution. So again, I'll log in. And I would advise, based on bitter experience, it's a good idea to do that second reboot. Next, I'm again going to make things slightly bigger on the screen. Let's go into Settings. And here, Universal Access, larger text and larger cursor, just so we can see things more clearly in the video like that. And if we also go down here to Details, we can see we're running Rocky Linux 8.6. We just close that down and go back up here again. It's also worth pointing out that by default here, the wired network is off. So I'm going to turn on wired network because if we don't have it connected, we can't do any upgrading. If we look across in Activities, we can see what's installed in this DaVinci Resolve version of Rocky Linux. We have the Blackmagic Design Desktop Video Setup application, that's hardly a surprise. Various other things for video. And we also have here the NVIDIA X Server settings, which have picked up my GT 1030 graphics card just fine. And we're currently running Linux driver version 525116.04. And this is not the most recent version, so this really needs fixing. We need the most recent version of the NVIDIA drivers for running the latest version of DaVinci Resolve. And as we've noted, we are currently running a non-supported version of Rocky Linux here, so this needs updating too. So the first thing we're going to do is to go to Firefox. And I've not added my max min buttons yet, so I'll just do that to maximize the window. And we're going to go to nvidia.com/drivers, like that. Here we are. And on this page, what we're going to do is to download the latest NVIDIA driver. And we could do this a bit later on, but as you'll see, it's easier to do it at this stage. So I'll use the drop downs to select things for my card. There we are. And note I've selected here Linux 64-bit. And we'll now click on Find, and then View. It's found the driver, which, as we can see, is significantly later than the one we had installed. We had 525.116.04. We've now got here 550.127.05. So let's click on Download, and then save the file. There we go. And now, in the future, that will be waiting for us in the Downloads folder. And yes, Firefox, I do want to close multiple tabs. Next, we're going to open up a terminal. Here we go. And I'm going to make the text a bit bigger so we can see it more clearly on screen. And we now need to execute commands with super user rights. But by default in Rocky Linux, the user we created during the installation process does not have sudo rights. And so we're going to perform our upgrade as the root user. So I'll type su and root like that, and enter the root password. And to upgrade from Rocky Linux 8.6 to the latest version of 8, which is 8.10, we just need to enter the command dnf and upgrade like that. And it asks us to confirm. We'll say yes. And with all that downloading completed, we're asked to confirm again. So we'll enter another Y and enter. And there we are, it is complete. It looks like our upgrade to Rocky Linux 8.10 has been successful, although I do know it will have broken our NVIDIA graphics drivers. And whilst I was initially tempted to reinstall them at this stage, I've learned the hard way it's very, very important to first do a reboot. And so that's what we're going to do. We will now reboot and discover that things are broken. And we can see straight away on my login screen that things are not right. And as you can see, we're clearly running in a low resolution. Let's just look at display settings. And can we get across there? Yes, we're running in at 800 by 600. And if we look in activities there and bring up applications and bring up the NVIDIA settings, clearly things are just not working. Things have been broken. But do not fear, we are prepared for that because, as you may recall, we downloaded the latest NVIDIA graphics driver. And you can hopefully understand why we did that earlier when we had a better display. And I think we now have to put the preferences here to a smaller font in the terminal because we're on a different scale of screen. There we are, that looks more usable. And again, I'm going to do a su root. And now we will navigate to the Downloads folder and have a look what's there. There we are, we've got our NVIDIA driver. And we need to make it executable, so we're going to do a chmod +x and the file name, which starts NV, and we'll press tab to complete and enter. There we are. And we now just need to execute the file with a dot and a /. Again, the file name NV and tab and enter. And there we are. It looks like things are running. And basically here we take the defaults. We will continue installation. And I don't think we need the 32-bit compatibility, but I've been selecting yes in my tests and it's been OK. And again, we'll OK here. Would we like to register the kernel module sources? Yes. And then here at this warning, we'll click on OK. We will select to rebuild. And in our only change to the defaults, we will select yes to automatically update our X configuration file. And then finally, we just need to click OK. And there we are, the process is complete. So let's again close down the terminal like that and now do another reboot. Yes, we're back again, clearly in the right resolution. The desktop once again looks okay, and we'll go into settings. and back from devices and down to details, where we can see we are running now Rocky Linux 8.10. Our update was successful. And if we also look back in activities and go to applications and our NVIDIA settings, yes, they are back again, and we are now running driver version 550.127.05. And so, as a result of all our efforts, we're now running a version of Rocky Linux with support until May 2029, coupled with the latest NVIDIA graphics drivers. Right, in theory, we're now in a position to successfully install DaVinci Resolve. And indeed, I've got the instructions and the install file here, although when I first went to access these files on this computer, I had a bit of messing around to do because I'd saved the files onto this external SSD in this folder here, and I wanted to copy these to the downloads folder, but I couldn't do it because when I tried to access the drive, I got this error message because by default, exFAT file system support is not installed in Rocky Linux. And so I had to open a terminal to execute another su root to run commands as a super user, and then to enter this command to add the repository RPM Fusion free release. And with this command executed and all OK, I then executed a DNF install fuse exFAT to install exFAT support, which allowed me to access the drive and get to the files I needed to copy to this system, as we can see. So let's now double-click DaVinci Resolve, although I'll warn you in advance it won't work. What will happen is this: we've got a missing package, even in the Rocky Linux image supplied for us by Blackmagic Design. But don't worry, we can fix this. We can go to a terminal and once again execute a su root, where this time we need to execute a DNF install and an EPEL release like that, followed by a CRB enable, followed by a DNF install and an XCB util cursor, which is the package we were missing. There we go. All seems to be okay. So let's now close the terminal. And let's now once again double click DaVinci Resolve, which this time looks better, doesn't it? Let's click on next and next again, agree to the terms and continue. And I think from here we'll just click on start install, where because we're in Linux, I've got to enter my password. And oh look, we're now installing DaVinci Resolve. And once again, it wants our password. And I'll warn you in advance that the system sits here on 99% for quite a long time, but do not worry, it will get there, it will work. And there we are, it's finished. So we'll click on finish. It's finished, it's amazing. Do we have DaVinci Resolve here and working? Let's look in applications. And yes, look, we've got DaVinci Resolve, we've got the control panels, we've got the Blackmagic Raw player, but let's launch DaVinci Resolve. Let's do its first run wizard. Here it is. We'll continue on that. Oh, this makes it all worth it, doesn't it? And we'll go for a quick setup. It's telling me my graphics card might not be quite powerful enough to do really complicated stuff. I know that, but it's still fine, my GT 1030. What type of project would I like? I think we'll go for HD and continue. And we'll store our media there. That's fine. And I'll use the standard DaVinci Resolve keyboard layout. And we're all set. It hopes I'm going to enjoy DaVinci Resolve. I'm sure I certainly am. So I'll click on Start. And here we are. This is looking good. If you've ever tried to install DaVinci Resolve in Linux, you'll know it's a great moment when things actually work. This is a good result. And so I think I'm now going to have a well-earned cup of tea, and I'll come back to you after that. Greetings, and guess what? I've not just had a cup of tea, but also several meals and a night's sleep, as it's now well into the next day, and I've been testing out DaVinci Resolve here in Rocky Linux for some time. And if we just wait for things to come up, here we are. As you can see, I've brought in several test edits. This one, for example, is a previous explaining computers video, and ironically it's a previous Explaining Computers video all about running DaVinci Resolve and other applications in Linux. And if I just press the spacebar to play the timeline, it should work. Yes, it's working. Oh look, a video about Linux video production. Oh look, it's me talking to us in a video. That's very confusing, isn't it? But everything here works absolutely fine. As you can see here, we were working in Ubuntu in this particular video, but I can certainly report that everything here running DaVinci Resolve here in Rocky Linux is working absolutely fine. The system is nice and solid and stable, as let's be honest, it really should be, given that Rocky Linux is the only officially supported distro for this video editor. Just to let you know, the only problem I've had has been running out of space bringing in my test edits. And indeed, I've not imported every clip here. You can see some are in red. And this is due to the way that by default Rocky Linux partitions the system drive in a manner that separates out user and system data. And to show you what this means, let's go into Applications and go to Utilities and Disks over there like that, where we can see that specifically on the 120 gigabyte SSD I've used for this test install, we've only got a 36 gigabyte home partition, with 8.4 gigabytes allocated to a swap partition and a whopping 74 gigabytes, most of our space, allocated to a root partition. And whilst I'm sure this kind of setup is a great idea for enterprise Linux systems, in my view it's overkill and not ideal for a graphics workstation setup. This said, if we'd opted for a manual installation, we could have fixed this, and on an operational video editing system, the videos will be stored in separate partitions on different physical media anyway, so this wouldn't be a problem. So this is just something to be aware of when you're installing Rocky Linux. And indeed, overall, I am happy and impressed with this Rocky Linux setup running DaVinci Resolve. Granted, it took some messing around, in fact several days of messing around to get to a position where I could demonstrate the method for how I set things up here, but I expected this from the outset. I knew it was going to be a journey, and I've learned a lot about Rocky Linux in the process. As the replacement for CentOS, Rocky Linux has already become popular in those Linux communities where it's one of only a few officially supported distros for certain key applications. Based on my testing of it for this video, it's also a distro I will strongly consider when I finally migrate from running Adobe software in Windows. This said, as I demonstrated in my Linux versus Adobe video earlier this year, it is perfectly possible to work in DaVinci Resolve and Autograph and related applications in, for example, Ubuntu, as I did successfully for a couple of weeks. And therefore, I do want to test out Rocky Linux further before I make any decision to adopt it as my daily driver. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And I hope to talk to you again very soon.